It's a recruiting Thursday here on Locked On Hawkeyes. We got our man Brian Smith, our scouting guru, taking a look at some of the prospects in the upcoming 2025 class, some Florida prospects that I was after, and one final look at this defensive line class for the Hawkeyes. A lot of recruiting. We break it all down today. Locked On Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts, and you can also watch us on YouTube. Make sure you hit the subscribe button while you're there. Helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. It is a recruiting Thursday here on Locked On Hawkeyes as we talk to Brian Smith. You can find him on X on Twitter at FBScout_Florida. And Brian joins us again this week. Brian, we are getting closer and closer to flipping the calendar to June, and that means a lot of camps going on, a lot more offers going out there. And for a lot of these coaches, it's crazy because just the different world that we live in recruiting. You know, for years and years, it was, well, we'll get the guy in the camp. We'll see how they play a little bit, maybe the first month of the season, their senior year, and then we'll see if we're going to offer them. You do that anymore, you are so far behind, it's just not going to work.
Yeah, camp season and getting all these kids in, like the 27, 26 kids and all that's important for Iowa or anybody else. In-state, out-of-state, if you're not involved with those kids, you'll lose them. And recruiting has sped up exponentially.
So I want to start here today with a couple of prospects from down in your neck of the woods down in Florida. Florida has been a place that Iowa has recruited throughout the years. It was something that was tapped into early in the Kirk Ferentz era. And in fact, the first guy that had that territory was Brett Bielema and did a really good job of bringing in some high-level players. You go back, Benny Sapp, Antoine Allen, Colin Cole, who played in the league for almost 15 years. A lot of high-impact guys in Florida. And though, you know, maybe they don't hit it at the same level they did initially, it's still a place that is incredibly important for them. Last year, Rashad Godfrey came in. We've talked about some of those Florida guys. And a couple are setting up visits to Iowa City coming up in the month of June. A couple of defensive backs. And the first thing we talked about a week ago, Brian, is Phil Parker. You know, when he's looking at you, you know, you probably got a pretty good tape. He looks for specific things, but when he finds them, he doesn't care if the kid's a 4-star or if he doesn't have another offer. He is going to go after those kind of guys. Let's start with the prospects and what you've seen watching the film. Let's start with Josh Guerriere, a quarterback prospect in Iowa. That's a position for the class of 25 that is incredibly important. A lot of depth is going to be leaving the program after the next couple of seasons, trying to rebuild that quickly. They're probably looking maybe 4, even 5 defensive backs this year. Let's start with Guerriere and what you've seen from him.
He's an Orlando area kid, plays at Hawkeyes on the west side. He can run, can change directions, could be a receiver or DB. Nice kid, easy going. I think he would fit in at Iowa. But the thing you're looking at there is just a natural change of direction, the burst, and the ability to jump and make plays. All the physical tools. 5'10", 5'11", and just kind of fits the cornerback role. I'm not sure if he would be more boundary, nickel, or field. I think he's still growing a little bit, filling out his frame, so he could fill out closer to 200 pounds. He's $175, if I remember right. So he can run, though. Iowa needs more guys like that, and he fits the mold.
That's a good one right there. Now, the biggest recruiting target out of this group, Grayson Littleton. And it's crazy the way recruiting goes, and especially at a place like Iowa. And if you're not talking about a local kid or even a Midwest kid, when you're talking about reaching outside of your area, normally to even have a shot, either you have to be the best of their offers, right? And maybe there's a middling ACC offer there, something like that closer to home. But for the most part, Iowa's normally the best offer for these guys. And then, they start to get an attention, and maybe Iowa is a place. It's not very often that Iowa in Florida is swimming with Clemson and Alabama and Oklahoma and Penn State for a prospect, but that is the case here with Grayson Littleton. Let's just start with him as a prospect and what makes him a 4-star.
Length. He's really long. Seeing him play bump coverage or play bump and he'll bail. He can do those things, but like the most important thing I saw was when he wasn't even moving. He was up in man coverage and his arm length is ridiculous. Coaches like traits. I know that parents complain my kid should be getting offers because he makes plays. Like coaches recruit on potential. Littleton, without even taking a snap, looks like a guy that should play at Alabama.
Oh, wow.
So that's just the way it is. And he can also turn and run. He's pretty fluid. I think he can play free safety if you wanted him to, but he can play corner. He's at least 6'1", and he has the bursts that you're looking for to make plays in the back of the end zone, running the guy down, catching up with him. He has those. Does he need more technique and all that, just like Garrier and all these other guys? Sure. But I'll take the kid with the traits every time, and so will Alabama. So did Saban, etc. And I'm sure that the coaching staff in Iowa City would love to do the same. Mm-hmm. So, he's got a connection to the Iowa Hawkeyes, and he's going to take a visit so you get a chance to shoot your shot. But he can pick his school. He's a really good prospect.
It's really fun when you kind of hear these stories. So Iowa got into this recruitment a little bit later. This is not like Iowa was the first program. As you know, that's something that always helps with kids too. If you're that first, major offer, that kind of gives you a leg up. That wasn't the case here. They got involved a little bit later than everybody else, but does have some family connections back here to the state of Iowa. And reading an article from him in one of the recruiting sites, he said exactly what you want to hear. He talked about the developmental aspect of the Iowa program, what he's looking for. He's looking for somebody that develops him, does all the things in terms of conditioning and strength programs. And it's like, boy, these are a lot of check marks. Just what he was saying that definitely looks at Iowa. The thing that made me a little bit nervous is I was one of the last official visits that he has set up, and maybe by the time he was even scheduled to make that visit to Iowa, maybe he's already committed somebody else. That's got to be a tricky part for these coaches of putting together that calendar, knowing you want to get the prospect on campus. For a higher level guy, maybe you don't get your choice of weekend or trying to do it a little bit earlier, because if it doesn't work out, if they fall into love with the place, you might not even get your shot to get the kid coming to your city.
A lot of people argue about this. Do we take the first guy that, comes in, like, we like this one kid better, but he's going to decide later. So that changes when you bring him in for visit. Like, there's so many different dynamics. There's no one answer.
Yeah.
Because every kid is different. Every family situation is different. Every connection to the kid is different. The timelines that the other schools are looking at. Like if Georgia says, we got one spot left, you commit now or you might lose it. That's not good for the other schools. No. Those are things that are not in your control. So you're absolutely right to bring that up. Iowa's like anybody else. They got to make some educated guesses on how much they can slow play one kid while waiting on a star. It's hard. It's really hard.
One other thing with Grayson Littleton, you mentioned the kind of the link that he has. We've seen over the last now 5-6 years, Iowa has incorporated the cash position, which basically turns them into a 4-2-5 team. They've used a bunch of different body types. Sebastian Castro did it at a high level last season for Iowa at the pick 6 against Iowa State. He's more of kind of that heavy safety, if you will, at that position. The guy before him, though, and Dane Belton, did it at a high level, more of a kind of a lanky prospect. Speaking of Florida guys, Dane Belton now playing in the league in the NFL. So they've done it. And I wonder if Littleton would be that kind of guy that could fit that kind of mold and either outsized cornerback or a smaller safety type. And he plays that corner position. One thing you do have to do, and the way that Phil Parker teaches it, if you're going to play that spot, not only do you have to cover, you also have to be able to tackle.
Well, that's the hardest spot in football physically. Because one play is a tight end in front of you, the next play it's 5'10", 170. You're not going to be good at both.
Mm-hmm.
There is no nickel that is good taking on the 250-pound tight end on a screen. None.
Yeah.
So I tell people this all the time. The hardest part about that position is accepting that you will physically be beaten up and accept it. Like, nobody wants to hear that. Then on the next play, you got to go chase a rabbit. It's awful. So I think the mentality part would be more important. I don't know Grayson all that well. I've just been around him, but the physical tools would give him the advantage because of the length. He could at least be competitive with bigger guys, and he's got great feet. Now the run game stuff, I haven't seen him in a live game. I don't know, but the run game stuff and the blitz stuff you're talking about, maybe. Florida kids are usually really competitive, so I don't worry about that very often. They're rather competent. I like his chances, but athletically, I don't see any spot in the secondary he couldn't play. That's why he's so coveted. Can't teach the length and the change of direction and the burst. He's got it.
We'll keep an eye on that one. And it's fun when we get some Florida prospects for Iowa and we're able to go back and forth with Brian based down in Florida. We continue here, Locked On Hawkeyes. We're going to take our final look as we've been kind of bouncing around to different position groups here, a couple of different players over the last couple of weeks, talking about the guys that will be making their way to campus next week. And we're going to take a look at the defensive line. This is as excited as I've certainly been for a defensive and especially defensive end class for Iowa. Some NFL bloodlines and a whole lot more. We'll get Brian's thoughts on the incoming defensive linemen when we continue. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast is brought to you by Gametime. The Gametime app takes the guesswork out of buying tickets, and you can get tickets for the NBA Finals even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. And just think of that. Now, we got a long ways to go next week as the NBA Finals begin, but if the Timberwolves can pull off something miraculous, how about that? Facing the Boston Celtics, and you want to be there, you have an opportunity. Not just tickets for the NBA. They got you covered with MLB. You're already making that trip and planning that trip for next season. In football season, they got you covered there. My favorite part of the Gametime app, the all-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows you the total upfront. You don't have to worry about what those fees are going to be, completely guessing what your final is going to be. Not the case with Gametime, and they're all in pricing. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Back with you once again here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Trent Condon, joined by Brian Smith as we're talking some Iowa football recruiting. Brian, let's jump into the incoming class of defensive ends. This is a really intriguing class. And you know, Iowa's a program in the past, build guys up. You find that guy that's maybe a linebacker in high school. All right, we're going to put 35, 40, 50 pounds on him and build them up that way and turn them into a defensive end. But this class has guys that aren't quite ready-made. There's still work to do. And I think there's an opportunity for maybe one of these guys to move in situationally in their first year in campus. But I want to start first with Joseph Anderson. He's a guy probably physically needs to add some more weight. Has NFL bloodlines. You start right there. His dad played in the NFL for a number of years. St. Louis area kid. Defensive end in St. Louis has been pretty good for Iowa. Adrian Claiborne, that one definitely jumps to the top of mind of what he was able to do in a Hawkeye uniform before playing in the NFL for over a decade. But he's on the track team, really good track in. He wins the triple jump in Missouri. He's running hurdles. Oh, and by the way, he's also doing at a pretty high level the field events. When you see something like that and that kind of measurables on the track, it's pretty eye-opening, at least to me. Your thoughts on Anderson?
I think it goes more than just his athleticism, too. He knows how to manage his time, how to train, how to eat. All of that has to come into play if you're training to be a football player and you still go out and not just be competitive in track. Mm-hmm. Like, he might be the best overall track kid in the state if that's all he had done. Like, big kids like that don't run really great or this. Like, he does a little of everything. And it also shows his flexibility. Like, some of those events, they're not necessarily meant for the bigger lumbering guys. And he's, 240 or whatever he is. He can move. So the question becomes with him, look, we've got a very athletic kid that we're going to play on the edge. If we're going to compete with Ohio State, et cetera, this is the kind of kid that's very important. You could make the argument he's the most important kid in the class because if you don't have pass rushers against Ohio State, Michigan, et cetera, you got no shot. And this kid's twitchy as all get out. The numbers don't lie, man. Like, that's an important football recruit for any program, but Iowa's not getting those guys very often.
Right.
Take advantage of it. It's just really no reason to think they won't. They develop as well as anybody.
The second guy on this list, another one with NFL bloodlines, Jimmy Kennedy, his dad is Devin Kennedy. Another interesting story. Jimmy Kennedy, obviously just a tremendous player at Penn State and what he was able to do in the league for a number of years. Dad was a whole lot bigger than son Devin is at this point. And Devin Kennedy, up until maybe this past season, thought he was going to be a college basketball player, and he still could have been. He decided, though, to go off of football not until his junior season. We're talking about that unmolded clay, right? There's a lot there, but when you look at the pedigree, you look just the opportunity that he got as a junior, his first time playing football at a competitive level, at a high level. He comes in there because of injury and puts together a great junior season, couples with an outstanding senior year. What do you see when you put in the film and put in Devin Kennedy?
That's a kid that can play multiple spots. And because his dad was so big, I wonder if he's going to, like, I hate projecting kids that his dad just wasn't good. Like, he was a special football player. Yeah. How much bigger is he going to get? Is he going to be a 3-tech? Is he going to be a tweener that plays both spots, like in and I don't know. But he's got athleticism, and it really helps when you can call dad and ask about, hey, what should I do in this? You know what I mean? He's got a lot of advantages. And again, Iowa develops. They will figure out the best spot for him within their scheme and probably to help him get to the NFL, because Iowa's obviously a predominant cover 2 team historically. So is the NFL. You know, like their scheme, it really helps transition kids. They'll figure it out for him. I just don't know exactly how they're going to do it. I'm not sure Parker knows yet.
Yeah.
Which is okay. Which is okay. You got to get him on campus and watch him go through drills. But I like their upside with kids that play in the NFL. You know, their dads did. It's a good sign. So I'll guess he ends up at strong side or 3-tech. Just kind of go from there.
With a guy like Kennedy, and just more in general for you, Brian, you see a guy, and you run across this often, guys that just pick up the game. Maybe played a little Pop Warner or something like that, but didn't play until later in high school. Knowing those kind of things and the learning process that it takes, even in a position with hand placement and the like, a defensive line. When you look at a prospect like that, do you have to measure? You just have to probably project a little bit more when you're talking about a guy that's just limited in terms of on-field playing.
The curve is huge. Like he might have a light goes on moment with any number of traits, setting the edge, how to use hand placement, to use a combination move, slap rip, or, you know, double hand swipe, whatever it is. You just don't know when it's going to be. So dad's probably going to be able to help, and people around him, I'm sure, have given him some tips too. But if you're Iowa, I wouldn't worry about it, because like the chances of him not figuring that out are pretty low. Again, Iowa does a great job of developing. The other thing they do is a great job of scouting kids to get to that developmental stage. They're smart kids. So I'm not worried about it. I don't think Iowa fans should be either. He'll figure that out.
Final guy in this class coming in, and they'll be making their way to Iowa City coming up in a week. Chimmy Shineke, kid from Texas. Now, of these 3 guys that we're talking about here today, he's probably the most physically developed. I mean, he looks like a man. Well, he's a man now, but that's a big dude. That's a guy that was incredibly productive, had to hold off some pretty big suitors themselves. Another place Iowa's always recruited Texas, but this is another prospect. They don't normally get kind of this high level prospect, at least early on. Let's start right at the top. What you see when you pop in the film of him.
I think that's a kid that can take the physicality a little bit better than most of the kids at his age. He played in the Dallas area, for people that don't know. Dallas high school football is really good. And he played big boy football. He played at Plano East. They've always had players for as long as I can remember. I think he'll be able to come in and contribute a little bit more in the run game, which is where kids usually struggle on the D-line. Because that's just, you know, you're going against guys that are 20 to 23 years old. It's a lot of weight room time that you don't have that they do. So he might play a little earlier, might redshirt his freshman year, but as a redshirt freshman, if he's playing a lot, wouldn't surprise me. And then again, this is another guy. Does he end up on the inside? Is he playing the outside? Do they move him around? I think with Parker and those guys, that's kind of a fun thing to do, because on 3rd and 8, you might make him a 3-tech if he's playing at 260, 270. Not many guards want to see that kind of athlete in front of them. But on 1st and 10, he might be the guy that sets the edge for you too. Good group here. I mean, you see defensive line classes for a program like Iowa. Are you as excited when you kind of look at these prospects and what they're bringing in, knowing that it just feels like this has a chance to be a special class, and we're going to be looking down the road in 2-3 years and saying, boy, did Iowa hit a home run in this class for defensive linemen? I think that it is. Parker's an older guy. This might be the last class that he sees through. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, at least through their junior year, because he's not going to get many groups like this at Iowa athletically. Again, he's not a star ranking guy. He probably doesn't look at it like I do,
right.
but they develop it so much differently than anybody else. Iowa is about the hardest recruiting study in the country.
Yeah.
So hard to argue with their success despite where their rankings are. They overachieve more than almost any program in college football. But I think this is a group that could really cause a lot of havoc, and Iowa could still be a top 10 defense. I mean, like last year's defense, if they'd have had any help at all in offense, it might have been the best defense in the country. But they were on the field too much.
Right.
You know, I mean, eventually you're going to cave. So, yeah, they got another group that could be very dominant and maybe more just natural, just rush the passer and drop, which Parker loves. He doesn't. He's not a blitz guy. It's a history.
Right.
So this fits his MO very, very well.
Final thing for you, and you talk about the Iowa football program with the ongoing litigation and now the settlement in the House versus NCAA case.
Oh boy.
One of the things that have come down is the potential, and though nothing is official yet, that walk-ons will no longer be a thing in college football. Now, it could lead to an increase in scholarships, maybe a bump up to 95 scholarships, but walk-ons going away, it'll hurt all programs to a certain level, but a program certainly like Iowa, maybe as impactful as anybody. We know the history of all the walk-ons and the success, and the NFL guys. I think there's well over a dozen now guys that started as walk-ons that played in the NFL, playing under Kirk Ferentz, which is incredible in its own right. A lot of all Big Ten players that have come out of that. Just first, your thoughts overall, not even the Iowa angle to it, but just overall, the thought process behind taking away something that has been such a great thing for college football as a whole.
I have no idea what they're thinking. What's the gain there?
Mm-hmm.
Why? What are we doing? Second part of that is you're going to get sued out of the bejesus if that happens, and that's why I don't think it'll happen.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea. What is the gain? Somebody explain to me what's taking away an opportunity for a kid to go and do that. What are they trying to force them on scholarship? Because that's Title IX.
Yeah.
That's the problem. That's why football doesn't have more scholarships, because it's Title IX. It's the elephant in the room in all of these conversations. These people don't even like to mention those terms because it's going to cause a rift. Why would you take away the walk-ons? It helps Title IX. Like, there's just no chance here. Not at all. I don't see
lot
that
of
happening.
head-scratching moments going on, Brian, throughout college athletics. But
Yes,
hey, we'll be here talking about it. There's no doubt about it. Thanks for your time as always, Brian. We'll check in again here, if not next week, certainly the week after camp season upon us. There's going to be a lot. I know Iowa going down to that big St. Louis camp in Lindenwood. That's where they're checking some things out, and there's going to be a whole lot. And then the elite camp, as they call it, that's when you bring in your prospects, and hope to see a couple of guys that pop and get those scholarship offers, and we'll talk to you about that. Thank you, Brian.
Take care, sir.
Brian Smith joining us here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast, talking a little bit of everything as we bounce around in the world of recruiting. Great look at that class of 2024 coming in, the defensive linemen. So excited, as I mentioned, about this incoming class. As we continue talking a little bit about what we just talked about there, what does this all mean for Iowa football? We'll take a big picture look at things, what Iowa's going to be doing, what these changes in college football are going to mean for a program like the Iowa Hawkeyes. We'll do that as we roll through here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Trent Condon back with you one final time. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Click that subscribe button while you're here. If you're watching on YouTube, 5-star review, on the audio side. Greatly appreciate each and every one of you for joining us, your team every day. Well, we talked about the potential that walk-ons are going away. And to add a little bit more context to this, one of the reasons that is out there is the cost that is associated. Those walk-ons, you still feed them. You still have to have the facilities, the practice, the pads, all the things that come along with it. That is the reason. But one thing that we miss a lot is the trickle-down effect, and potentially the talk of scholarships for a particular sport being unlimited. You have a roster of 35 baseball players, then you're going to have the ability to give out 35 baseball scholarships. As Brian mentioned, well, that's going to impact Title IX. And all of a sudden, your crew team is going to have 120 members on it because you have to have equal scholarships on each side. If your population of your student body is 55% female and 45% male, that means that 55% of the scholarships need to go to females. And that's why balancing the books is incredibly difficult. The thing that concerns me about all this litigation, the walk-on program going away, would be definitely impactful to Iowa. Think of that hardworking Iowa kid, wants to walk on, wants to play for the Hawkeyes. Not having that ability anymore would be a huge detriment to the Iowa program. But the trickle-down effect that also is going to be there. And as we talk about matching up scholarships and figuring out that part of it, Iowa is still going to have wrestling. How many other wrestling programs are there going to be? Because I believe we are going to see massive cuts happen across college athletics. I believe that sports are going to be cut. I believe that in order to remain competitive at the highest level of football and men's basketball, the programs are going to go bare bones. If that's what they have to do and they have to match the scholarships, and by law they do, which is a good thing and great for the opportunity of women athletics. This is not some deriding what Title IX is. That's not this conversation. However, the trickle down will lead to a cut of men's sports. Tennis, golf, gymnastics. We see gymnastics across the country. What are there, 20 programs that still play at the Division I level? You have those kind of sports, and a program like wrestling, what's going to be left? Is it going to be like gymnastics where there's only 20 programs left that even compete at the D1 level? It's a real possibility. These trickle-down effects are going to be immense. They're going to be impactful, and they're going to be disappointing for college athletics that I believe all of us love. If you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to anticipate you have a pretty good love of college athletics. And with that, you're just left saying, what is the end game? It's all about money. It's all about getting these guys paid, the people that are putting in the actual work, getting something back for it. And I'm fine with that. But we have to figure this out. This is an incredibly important time inside college athletics. And unfortunately, some questions about the leadership. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. With you each and every day. We got one more coming your way later this week. We get you covered on Friday with a lot going on in the world of the Hawkeyes. We'll get a little more deep, in-depth conversation on the announcement by Peyton Samford, him coming back. David Eichelt's going to join us on the Friday show. Looking forward to that one as well. Also want to let you know, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with all the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Back with you on a Friday. Enjoy the night. We will talk to you again tomorrow. Go Hawks.